Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Lawcast. Joining me, as always, is Cewsh. How are you doing, man?
I am doing freaking awesome. I'm so hyped up after this show.
Yeah, are you extremely fired up?
I feel very extreme.
So, we are talking today about ECW Barely Legal. We decided to do this one because we are just past the 20th anniversary of this show. It was April 13th, 1997. And how old does it make you feel that 1997 was 20 years ago?
Extremely, extremely old. Not to pass along personal information, but I was 12 years old when this show aired. I was not watching wrestling at the time. Get it, man. This looks as old as when I was young watching like old NWA tapes, and I'm like, man, why is it lit so badly? Why is everybody look all weird? This is that now, and that makes me feel super old.
ECW was always at its heart an outlaw promotion.
True.
So the first thing that is interesting about this is just how hard it was for them to actually get on pay-per-view. Took them a long time. I feel like ECW's peak as far as creative quality was probably 1995, but it took them until 97 to get on pay-per-view, and the show almost didn't happen because of the mass transit incident, which I don't want to go super into detail on because I think people have mostly heard the story, but basically a 17-year-old kid talked his way into getting booked on an ECW show. And unfortunately, it turned out he was in a match with New Jack, who was crazy, and cut the kid's head open with an X-Acto knife, and he bled like a stuck pig and ended up in the hospital. And there were nearly criminal charges filed. This got them a ton of negative publicity, and it initially looked like Request TV, who I think at the time was the biggest pay-per-view provider, who was going to carry the show, canceled it.
Yeah, it really just goes to show, like, this is part of ECW's appeal, not this specific incident, but just somehow the fact that ECW was the kind of place where a kid could slip through the cracks and get himself involved in a match where he's getting bladed by New Jack. It somehow added to, like, the dangerous appeal of it, but obviously the sponsors and the pay-per-view providers not excited.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of the appeal, that it was so taboo. I just remember, like, as a kid, as a young wrestling fan, I didn't get to see ECW until they got on TNN in 1999, but I heard of them before that, and it was just like this thing that's like, oh, ECW is so crazy. No, ECW, like, that's real. They're actually trying to kill each other. Like, as soon as you turn it on, it just feels like something you're not supposed to be watching.
Right. It does have that feel to it, and it feels grimy and dangerous and bloody, and there's just like half-naked women everywhere. Like, especially at the time, even when this pay-per-view first airs, like, we're deep into the Monday Night Wars when this pay-per-view airs. It's 1997. Still, nothing looked like this. Not even like Nitro with the peak of Nitro looked anything like this.
No, it was controversial around this time when Bret Hart did that promo where he said, like, goddamn and bullshit. Like, that was really pushing the envelope.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in the opening video package of this show, people like fall to their death from 50 stories up.
Yeah. Just everything they could do to be controversial, they were doing. It cost them Kurt Angle when they did the crucifixion angle at the show that Kurt was at. They did a lot of things that were way out of bounds, but this was what was cool in the 90s. When I think about the 90s, I just kind of think about everything was rebellious, and Fight Club and Beavis and Butthead, and The Simpsons was considered kind of taboo for a while, that we had a cartoon where the kid and the family were fighting and Bart would get choked by Homer and that kind of thing, which today doesn't really seem controversial, but it's just a different time.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of younger people lately. Like, I told like some of my younger wrestling friends that I was doing a podcast on this topic, and a lot of them are like, ECW, what was the big deal? Because when you look back on it, it doesn't necessarily hold up all the time, for sure.
Oh, not at all.
And
not even
when you try to describe these cult promotions and these cult events in wrestling history to people, it's really hard. because unless you were there, especially if you were there and you were an early adopter and you feel like kind of ownership over it, like I started watching Ring of Honor in early 2003. So it was the same kind of thing where as it built up like huge like national credibility and all the big smarks and everybody's into it, like it sort of like takes on a life of its own, like greater than the product itself. You know what I mean? Like, it becomes like a force of momentum. And this was that way greater extent. There's never been anything in wrestling that was a cult of personality like this was.
No. At the beginning of this show, I mean, I think the epitome of that is that the biggest chant is ECW. But at the beginning of the show, when they first kind of cut in, it's just such a celebration. The fans are celebrating that, like, we made it to this moment, and they're so bought in. They all feel like they're part of the team. And if crowdfunding had existed at this point, they probably would have stayed in business, because I bet Heyman could have milked these people out of a lot of money to keep things going.
Oh yeah, I bet he kicks himself every day that he didn't think of it first.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing to me that ECW managed to do was they came along at a time where people were ready for a different kind of wrestling than what was being promoted by the big two. So like I said, the peak of ECW was probably 1995, when they had Raven and they brought in all the luchadors and they had Malenko and Benoit and Guerrero. And you look back at like what was going on in WWF and WCW at that time, and it's like, I mean, it's just WWF is so kind of boring and behind the times. It's Diesel and Doink the Clown and Duke the Dumpster Droese. And WCW is doing Hulk Hogan versus the Dungeon of Doom. And like both promotions are just presenting a product that's 10 years out of date. And ECW is cutting edge, bringing in the best wrestlers from all over the world, letting them do whatever they want. And they've got heavy metal music on their show, and they're mixing in hip hop culture. And just Heyman was a guy who kind of knew what was cool, had a way of figuring out what people wanted to see. And the big companies were not giving people what they wanted at that point. And the tragedy for ECW was they brought in, basically they just got their product ripped off. Like the Attitude Era was a ported, bigger version of ECW with better talent. And WCW kind of just stole all of their guys. WCW took Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, Rey Mysterio, Psicosis. List goes on. I mean, the only guys ECW could hold on to were like Shane Douglas, who had so much heat nobody would hire him, and Justin Credible, who neither of the big two really wanted at that point.
And then all of them did eventually go anyway. I think Douglas left like 3 or 4 times during the course of the promotion. And I do want to say,
kept getting fired from wherever he went.
Oh yeah, I do want to say too, the most successful thing that Paul Heyman did, aside from just adapt to what his fans wanted and present it, was you have to understand the climate at the time. There were 2 wrestling companies that were gigantic. We're talking rosters of 50-plus wrestlers, all the top talent that there was in the business. It's not like today where WWE might employ a crap ton of people, but they don't employ everybody. There was barely any talent on the independent scene at the time. It was hard. Like if you look back at the time, there wasn't really an indie scene like there was today. The territories had fallen apart. There weren't big indie promotions. There wasn't anywhere to get finished talent and put it on your show before WWE or WCW snapped it up. So what he took is all of this flawed talent, all of these people who couldn't have made it any other way, found a way to make them marketable, and then presented them, and just people accepted them for what they were. And even as we go on with the show, a lot of these people really suck, but people love them because Heyman presented what was good about them, and that's the genius.
Yeah, it's like how people always say this about the New England Patriots, that their greatness is that they find guys who can do a particular thing well, and they only ask them to do that thing, and Heyman is the exact same way. 911 was just a big dude who could choke slam people, so he didn't ask him to do anything else but that, and 911 became one of the most over acts in the company because all he would do is show up and choke slam somebody every show. Yeah.
Though we will get to something later on that he does ask people to do that is dumb and overexposes them. But we'll get to that later.
All right, so getting into the show a little bit. 2 dark matches. Louis Spicolli beats Balls Mahoney. And in a tag match, Chris Chetty and JT Smith defeated Little Guido and Tommy Rich. And then we open the TV card. Joey Styles welcomes us to the show. I always loved his pay-per-view introductions. I'm just kind of a big Joey Styles fan in general. He gets the crowd fired up. The crowd is going absolutely crazy. This is, their dreams have come true. Their kind of little favorite promotion has finally made it. And then the Dudley Boys and Joel Gertner cut off Joey.
And the Dudley Boys were such an interesting thing because now that they've made it so gigantic, sort of revisionist history will say that they were like the greatest tag team of all time and that they ran ECW. And certainly if you watch like the ECW DVDs that WWE has put out, the Dudley Boys are all over them, right?
Yeah.
Not like a great team here yet. I don't know what part, like how far along they are here, but this isn't like a great segment for them. They don't cut a very interesting promo, and then they just kind of hang around.
Yeah, this is not the crazy heat promos that we would later see from Bubba, where like he was the only guy in wrestling who was nearly causing riots in the 90s. That was something we probably hadn't seen since wrestling in the South in the 70s when people still thought it was real.
Yeah, this is very different. I don't know why Joel Gertner originally got put with the Dudley Boys, but it's such a weird combination.
Because he's a sleaze. I don't know. I'm endlessly entertained by Joel Gertner promos, even though they're terrible.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I've never seen anybody with a gimmick like him where he's just like a fat, greasy guy who's just out there calling himself the Stud Muffin. Like, it works. It doesn't necessarily work with the Dudleys, but it's the whole thing. Like, there's heat on it, and then the Eliminators come out.
Yeah. So the Eliminators are Perry Saturn and John Cronus, two kind of high-flying badasses, and this match is mostly a showcase for all the awesome stuff they can do. Eliminators are the challengers here, and this match, to me, showed that kind of spot fest matches with zero selling or psychology are not new to wrestling, because this is just move, 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 move. This is the epitome of a video game match.
Yeah, this isn't even like the kind of spot monkey matches that you see these days, or on the Indies or Ring of Honor style or whatever. There's like a 5-minute span of this match.
Well, the match is only 6 minutes long, so maybe it's
so there's like a 3-minute span of this match where like the Dudleys don't do anything. They just take moves, one after another, after another, after another.
Yeah, and like it's just the Eliminators showing off that they can do all sorts of awesome moonsaults and handspring elbows and other cool stuff that you weren't seeing a ton of in American wrestling at this time. But yeah, it's a quick match, 6 minutes. The Eliminators get the win with total elimination, which is a simultaneous spin kick leg sweep, which I, as a kid, thought was the coolest thing I had ever seen.
Yeah, the cool thing about it is that they would hit it right about like 1 in 10 times. The other 9 times it looked like crap, and then the 10th time oh my god, it was the greatest finisher of all time.
Yeah, but they hit total elimination on Bubba to win the tag titles at 6 minutes. A fun opening match, not a work of art, but just cool showcase for this style of wrestling. High impact, fast paced, high flying. WCW was having these kinds of matches with the cruiserweight division. WWF really wasn't doing anything like this at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do kind of want to point out, too, that the Eliminators are kind of forgotten from ECW history. Like, whenever they talk about it now, or that, like I said, they do those specials that are for new fans, the Eliminators barely ever come up, even though they were a huge deal for ECW. A really, really huge deal. Yeah. It's just weird how, like, they've been forgotten.
Yeah, I don't know really what happened with Cronus. He never made it into the big two. I think he must have just had he had a neck injury or something that ended his career. And Saturn had a good run in WCW, but didn't really have much success in the WWF, and then is just kind of dropped off the face of the earth from there. I've heard he's had lots of problems and lived kind of an interesting life. I think he was on Jericho's podcast a little while back, and it was a really good episode, kind of catching up with all the stuff he's been through over the years. But yeah, kind of two guys who get left out of the narrative of history.
Yeah, because they were very cool and very, very, very different.
Yeah, they were one of ECW's buzzier acts. I remember hearing about them, before I'd seen ECW. I knew about the Eliminators and that had heard that they were the best tag team in the world. So our next
Yeah.
match, we've got Lance Storm against Rob Van Dam. Storm is a substitute for Chris Candido. Interestingly, you would assume that in a Lance Storm Van Dam match, Van Dam would be the face and Storm would be the heel. But Van Dam was playing heel here for basically the only time in his career. He was Mr. Monday Night, and his gimmick is he's campaigning to get signed by the WWF, and Storm is an injury substitute for or no, it was supposed to be Storm versus Candido, but Candido's hurt and they subbed in Van Dam. So I guess Rob Van Dam wasn't going to be used on this show, which I find insane.
The whole thing here is kind of vaguely suspicious. And not only because later on the very injured Chris Candido was taking full bumps onto his injured arm and stuff like that. Maybe he was really hurt. I don't know. But the fact they were pushing RVD pretty seriously at the time. It's not like he was just nobody. And then he
was one of the guys that they put on Raw when they did the ECW invasion.
Right. And then they make it such an angle after the match about how RVD doesn't feel appreciated, and it just goes along with his Mr. Monday Night thing. This smells like an angle to me. I don't know for sure probably. That it is, but it works. I mean, if it was on the fly, man, they killed it.
Yeah. Storm is rocking a hilarious, ponytail, rat tail mullet.
Okay, let's paint a word picture here, because it's not enough just to say that. He has a crew cut, a flat top crew cut, and in the back, he has a tadpole retreating away from the body of the tadpole frog, that tail, except in the middle it's blonde. So it's just coming to a weird floppy tail that's blonde in the middle and black on the outside. It is the most confounding haircut I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about this on his podcast as the greatest old shame of his life that he had this haircut. But just he's a really bland guy with no personality, so he was just looking for something to kind of stand out, and this is what he came up with.
And that's what he is in this match, too. It's really interesting, actually, because he and Van Dam are such opposites. Everything Storm does is so precise, and they're equally athletic, but they use it in such completely different ways. It's it's a real clash of styles.
Yeah, everything Van Dam does is out of control. It always just looks like he's going to screw up his kick and knock his opponent out, which he does in a fair number of his matches. I remember when he first came to the WWF, there was this long stretch where he hard weighed his opponent every single match for 2 months straight.
Yep, one of those Van Dam potatoes that was famously dished out everywhere that he went. But yeah. Even though that he looks out of control, he feels out of control, and yet so much of his stuff hits. So it's not one of those people where it just looks sloppy or anything like that. He does a swinging guillotine leg drop over the top rope where it looks like there's no way he's going to hit him with the leg, and then he hits it perfectly. That's Van Dam. Somehow it works.
Yeah, this is the fun match you would expect from these guys. It's a Van Dam match, so the psychology is going to be a little shaky. But yeah, both guys just showing off a lot of high flying and high impact stuff. Chair gets involved, so Van Dam goes for the Van Daminator. Storm hits him with the weakest chair shot I've ever seen, and Lance Storm just seems like the kind of wrestler who wouldn't be able to throw a chair shot because he would be so disdainful of the idea that you would be using a steel chair in a wrestling match.
It's not even just one, it's two. They get to the point in the match where it's time for Storm to slam Rob Van Dam in the face with a chair. The crowd's ready for it. Van Dam's on his knees just waiting for it. And he just pats him across the face like you're dabbing yourself with a handkerchief. Just pop, there you go. And the crowd turns on him immediately.
Yeah, this is ECW. No fake chair shots here. You got to hit him for real in ECW. Yeah, and then Van Dam kicks the chair into his face.
Yeah, it was hilariously bad. And they turn him heel in that 1 second.
Yeah, standing moonsault, Van Dam gets the win. And then Storm gets up, offers to shake Van Dam's hand. Van Dam refuses, says he doesn't care about respect. He just wants to make money, and you'll be seeing him on Monday night soon.
I will say, like, people don't know because he was never given the chance in WWE to really do this. Van Dam was a really good promo. Like, he had this really interesting character of like this athletic mercenary who knew he could do whatever he wanted, and like he sold it so well. Like he had the crowd eating out of his hand in this promo, and he's the only person on the show who cut a promo who understood what restraint was and like cut himself off at a decent time.
I don't. Yeah, just his WWF promos were never good. It just seemed like the only thing they could figure out for his character is like he's a stoner and he's really apathetic about everything.
Yeah, I
It's
don't really
kind of
know
like,
like where the
I don't know,
disconnect
I
was.
might win, I might not. It's not really that big of a deal. Whatever, man.
Yeah, who cares? I'm Rob Van Dam, yo.
Yeah,
But here, I mean, he's on fire. Like it's great, and that's why like he is so obviously getting a giant push here. And obviously, who's ever been a replacement guy in a match like this and then goes over the other guy? Like that doesn't sound right.
yeah. Rob Van Dam was my favorite part of ECW. Just his like 2 year run with the TV title, where they were just bringing in guys from everywhere to fight him, was the coolest thing. I was so into RVD.
And it's so interesting that he was easily the most marketable person that they had. Maybe Tazz, but he stayed the longest. Like
Yeah,
Van Dam could have absolutely left. Like there's no way that he couldn't have found another home somewhere. It's just very interesting that he stayed on to the end. It's basically like Tommy Dreamer and Rob Van Dam and just incredible.
yeah.
Like that's the weirdest thing.
I just Heyman always paid him because he knew he couldn't lose him. Like he knew he was the one thing they had that could keep them in business.
And then he was right. He has
Yeah,
most of the like I remember back in the Kazaa days where you would get like little GIF clips of things, and watching the GIFs, I didn't even know who he was, what ECW was, but I saw like the GIFs of the Van Terminator and that like giant flip he did into the crowd. Like I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And that's the only way I knew
yeah.
who he was when he showed up in WWE.
The amount of buzz he had in this era, it was just like if you asked any internet wrestling fan from the late '90s, like who's the man, who's the best, everybody's answer was Rob Van Dam.
Yeah, that's crazy. There's never been anybody else like that. I mean, it's like a whole other level, even from like the CM Punks and Bryan Danielsons. Like, there's no buzz like that.
No, well, nobody else did. Anybody else in wrestling wrestle this way at this
I don't
point?
think anybody else, even to this point, has ever wrestled in exactly the same style as Rob Van Dam. You know, a lot of people have tried to, but he's one of those weird freaks of nature that you can't mimic. It's almost like when we talked about like The Rock's promos, like the other podcast. It's just like it's not something that's replicatable. Like people have tried and they failed. It's just unique to him.
And he doesn't age. Looks exactly the
Yeah,
same
he's
now as
still
he did
doing
back
this
then.
stuff.
Yeah, I bet he could show up on Raw next week and just like wrestle the Rob Van Dam match.
Yeah, I've
When he
literally
was,
seen him do it in the last year.
yeah, yeah, just freak of nature. Doesn't feel like he ever really lived up to his potential. Timing didn't quite work out for him, but yeah, still, I think one of the more entertaining guys of this era. So
Absolutely.
next match is, I think, by a wide margin, the best match on this show, and just probably one of the best wrestling matches that took place in 1997. 6-man tag match. It's the Great Sasuke, Gran Hamada, and Masato Yakushiji versus Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo, and Terry Boy Mensteo. So these guys, as far as I know, did not actually wrestle in ECW. Heyman just brought him in to have this awesome match.
Yeah, he had a kind of a lightweight partnership with a lot of indie Japanese promotions, FMW, Michinoku Pro, just kind of a wide ranging. Anytime anybody wants to come over, they would talk to Paulie.
Yeah. So, I mean, you are more of the Japanese wrestling fan than me. So, can you kind of give the background on these guys? And was there an actual storyline to this match beyond Taka Togo and Mensteo being the Japanese Blue World Order, which is ECW's parody of the NWO, and I guess that's the parody of the NWO Japan.
There actually sort of was. There was sort of an indies spanning thing that was going on. It was mainly just between Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo, Mins Teo, and Gran Hamada. And it was sort of the veterans generation versus the young boys who are like looking to make a name for themselves, the cocky little assholes. You've seen it a million times, especially in Japan, where respect is the basis of basically every single feud. But yeah, basically they just brought that same kind of idea over here. Michinoku, Dick Togo, and Mins Teo had been doing this kind of thing for a while, and basically Taka and Dick Togo will go on to do basically the same character for the rest of their careers. But yeah, they're doing great. Like the other guys with Gran Hamada aren't as important, but I just want to say Gran Hamada, who is like 50 when this match takes place, may be the most athletic guy in it.
Oh, he's amazing in this match.
Unbelievable. Also, Ayoko Hamada's father, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check on that real quick. Yeah. So just, one other thing. But yeah, it was just one of those things where they kind of bring over an established thing that's going on. It's actually very similar to the 6-man that Dragon Gate did in Ring of Honor a couple years ago. People are more familiar with that. And so they just bring it over here. They actually, the other guy, whose name I keep blanking on because he was like a last-minute replacement, like the young boy that they include in the match.
Yakushiji.
No real business being here, but I mean, he's actually part of the most fun of the match because he's just getting his ass kicked.
Yeah.
It's great.
Every time he gets in the ring, he gets the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah. Now, the good thing about Mins Teo, Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo is that they were doing some really pioneering heel stuff. And, like, you kind of see it in here, the thing where they are all pose on top of the guy all at one time.
Great.
It's
yeah,
genius.
I think it's Sasuke. I love it. It's just so shitty.
Yeah, it's the kind of heel stuff that other people were also doing at the time. Like, it's kind of an evolution of, like, if you've ever read Jericho's books and you heard about Jado and Gato and their stuff in war, like, it's kind of an extension of that. Like, that was going on all across the Japanese independent scene at the time. And Michinoku Pro, which was specifically, like, it was basically fed into a little bit by Ultimo Dragon School, Torimon Pro. And like there's a lot of veteran stuff versus brand new kids coming up. Those kids never really rise as high as the other veterans did, but I'm going to stop talking about this now. I could go all day.
Yeah, this is an awesome match. Like, I can't even begin to start listing off all the spots in this match, but it's just like Hurricane Ranas, Tornado DDTs, power bombs, all sorts of like stuff you were not necessarily seeing a whole lot of in American wrestling at this point. And it's all just smooth and timed perfectly. It's normally, I feel like in a kind of lucha libre tag match like this, you'd have moments where like guys were just standing around waiting for somebody to hit them, and that never happens here. Everything's on time here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's and not only that, but the amount of time that they get to tell the story and do this match, it's outrageous compared to everything else on the show. It felt like 30 minutes. I don't know how much time they actually got.
Yeah, like 15.
Yeah, but I mean, they have an epic amount of time to get this going, and everything is fast-paced and moving, and the crowd is responding to literally all of it. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that had never been seen in the States before. Not just, like, the actual moves themselves, but some of the heel work from Michinoku Pro. Gran Hamada's throwing out, like, wild Hurricane Ranas out of his ass. Like, even though he looks like a hobbit, like, it's utterly fantastic.
Yeah.
Do want to correct myself real quick, by the way. Torimon wasn't until the 2000s. Don't want to lose my indie cred with people.
Yeah, of course not. I'll just say, if you've never seen this match, like, queue up WWE Network and watch this one. It'll be worth your 15 minutes. Best match.
It's
on the
honestly,
show.
this might be the only thing from the show that you need to watch. Like, there are other things on the show that are fun, but this is a must-watch match.
Yeah. Not that it particularly matters, but the face team gets the win. Sasuke pinned Taka, I think, with the Dragon Suplex.
Now, I did say earlier that the other guys weren't really important. I kind of wait until the end to talk about Sasuke a little bit. The Great Sasuke, who was one of the great junior heavyweights of all time, legitimately the night before this wrestles in the Tokyo Dome against Jushin Liger for the J Crown Octuple Championship, Unified Championship even. if you've ever seen a picture of Great Sasuke or Ultimo Dragon where they have like 1,000,000 belts on, that's what that was. It's 8 different titles that they all carried at once. And literally, like, they were defending it at this exact moment. So that's like the height of junior heavyweight wrestling in Japan. That's literally going on the night before he travels across the world and has this epic match.
It's basically every junior heavyweight title in the world except for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship, which was unified with it when Dragon won the WCW Cruiserweight title while he was holding the J Crown.
Yeah, that whole thing is actually one of the coolest things in wrestling history to me. Like, they literally combined, it's New Japan, Michinoku Pro, the NWA, CMLL, UWA, WAR, Wrestle Association, or Wrestling Romance, if you prefer, World Wrestling Association, and the World Wrestling Federation's light heavyweight title that they forgot they had. And then the whole reason that the J Crown winds up being disbanded and becoming one title again, WWE's like, hey, we should have a light heavyweight division. Didn't we used to have a light heavyweight division? Yeah. Where's our belt?
Yeah, Vince McMahon is just like, goddamn, Jerry, what happened to that belt? Go find it.
It's like some dude named El Samurai or Shinjiro Utani is holding it in Japan. Should I book a flight? And like, they literally do that.
Yeah, like I don't even remember when they had a light heavyweight title. I assume it was the 70s, maybe the early 80s.
Yeah, it was a long, long time ago.
I think I may have
it was
seen defended at Showdown at Shea in 1980.
Yeah, because it was almost only defended in Mexico. Like, it was basically just Perro Aguayo versus Gran Hamada for it 1,000,000 times. And then it was totally forgotten about. Like, it was defended on house shows in Mexico a lot until Great Sasuke won it and over Arrow Flash and just brought it to the Japan and made it a thing.
Yeah. So that was, you're right, probably the peak of junior heavyweight wrestling in the entire world. And I don't know, maybe someday the WWE Cruiserweight division will reach those heights, but I wouldn't count on it.
Oh, no. Matches like Sasuke and Liger, I mean, we're talking like some of the greatest things that have ever been done in a junior heavyweight ring. And I honestly can't say that anything like it will ever happen again. Like, Liger's probably the best there ever was. Sasuke's probably top 3. So that's what we're dealing with here. And Sasuke is like an afterthought in this match compared to Hamada. So that just gives you an idea.
Yeah. All right, so next match. For the ECW World Television Championship, Shane Douglas defends against Pitbull number 2. And holy shit, were there a lot of storylines going on in this match.
Yeah, there were.
So Douglas broke Pitbull 1's neck. And also Douglas has been stalked by a mysterious masked man. And if Douglas wins, the masked man has to reveal himself. So Douglas, for protection, comes out to the ring with masked riot police. Might factor into the end of this match. Who knows?
Which Joey Styles specifically says are uniformed police officers in riot gear. Like, they're actually police officers, which is important later because it's just funny to me.
Yeah. So I thought this match was kind of garbage.
Oh, it was an embarrassing failure. Not just the match itself, which was fucking garbage, but everyone in it. I don't dislike many wrestlers, but for some reason I've always hated Shane Douglas. Well, it's so funny to me because he basically is wrestling like a WWE, WCW style. Slow-paced, rest holds, chatter at the crowd, come back slowly, do another move, etc., etc. The crowd is silent for his whole match. They don't give a shit. This is a revenge match. This is a bloody, blood-curdling feud where someone's neck got broken and that's your brother and you're going to get revenge for him. And it's just, there's like 50 rest holds.
Yeah.
And every spot in it is just ill-conceived. There's the spot where the barricade is set up, so they're going to crotch him on it. And they fuck it up, and then they do it again, and it's such a crappy spot that people boo it, because it's like, why are you wasting our time with this?
Yeah, I think he was going for an atomic drop, and the way his leg went into the barricade, he's lucky he didn't get his leg broken. And then
Yeah, and
Douglas like just picks up the barricade and throws it at him, which doesn't seem even remotely safe.
no. And I mean, I don't want to speculate. I'm not a professional wrestler, so I can't say with any degree of certainty what exactly is going on inside the ring. But it sure seems like Pitbull number 2 doesn't know what the fuck he's doing at all. Like, he's literally, like, there are segments where Shane Douglas will just be speaking into his ear openly for like 10 straight seconds before they do the next thing.
Yeah, I'm not usually good at like catching when people call spots, but here, yeah, it was about as blatant as I've ever seen it.
And the thing that was aggravating to me is Pitbull number 2 does this thing where he'll Irish whip you, but he won't follow through with it. So he'll just be like, kind of do like a wrist flick, and then you go flying at the corner, and it's like, it just looks lazy and shitty to me.
At one point, Douglas hits 3 consecutive pile drivers, and Pitbull kicks out, which is just one of my pet peeves when like somebody kicks out of a ridiculous amount of things, and especially when the pile driver isn't presented with the respect it deserves. Like three straight pile drivers is like the match is over and the guy is going to the hospital afterwards.
Yeah. And that wasn't at like the end of the match.
No,
that was
that
in
was
like the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, that was at the beginning of the match. So finally, this match is put out of its misery after Douglas hits a really shitty belly to belly suplex.
And I can't get over across to you more how little passion there is in this match for it being like a huge blood feud. They just lazily trade clotheslines for such a long time. And then Shane Douglas actually beats the guy with his finish clean. And that's it. And then Pitbull number 2 is forgotten about. They just move on to the next thing. Like, that shit never even happened.
This match was over 20 minutes long. It was the longest match of the night.
That is madness. They did not have 5 minutes worth of material.
Nope.
And everyone was in a different match. I swear to you. Francine is screaming, like, don't hurt him. Come on, get up. Like, this is, like, there's, like, a punishment being laid out. There is none. Gary Wolf, the guy who had his neck broken, is sitting in the front row. And, like, still, like, a huge neck brace. Like, his neck is still broken. At one point, he jumps over the barricade, attacks Shane Douglas, is dragged away by security. That does not play into the finish at all.
Nope.
The match goes another 10 minutes.
Yeah, this was garbage. And then, okay, so the aftermath. We hear Rick Rude's voice over the PA. The masked man comes out. He's got the Rick Rude robe on. Douglas beats him up, but then one of the riot cops unmasks himself, and the riot cop is Rick Rude. So who's in the mask? It's Brian Lee. Do you know if there was any like storyline between Brian Lee and Shane Douglas?
Actually, yes. Chris Candido, and Shane Douglas were all in a group together called Triple Threat. So this was Brian Lee betraying Shane Douglas. And like, yeah, Joey Styles tries to get across that like Rick Rude must have paid him money to betray him, even though they don't indicate that at all. And it's actually one of those great examples of like Joey Styles, like the psychic, whereas like the guy comes out who's supposed to be Rick Rude, he like points at Francine, and Joey Styles is like, he wants the girl or he's not gonna leave. Like, Joey, how the fuck do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, so the cool, debut for Rick Rude, and I guess the Brian Lee Shane Douglas thing is significant, but yeah, that was a long match to get to that.
Yeah, and for the record, 40-year-old Rick Rude doing his like pelvic thing in street clothes is creepy as hell. It did not. It looks like your friend's dad doing like the yeah, come and get it. Yeah, it's horrible. It's nightmare fuel.
Oh man. All right. So next we've got what, not for the world title, but probably the true main event of the show, Tazz versus Sabu. So you want to take over the backstory for this one?
This is the match that got me into ECW. Like, I had heard about ECW like later on, mostly when like WWE guy or ECW guys came to WWE and started debuting and stuff like that. But this is what made me go back and watch, because I remember watching the old Raw where like Sabu and Tazz are fighting and Sabu jumps off the R and all of that good stuff. And like they're hyping this matchup so much. This match is brilliant, and it builds from basically like the start of Tazz's career in ECW basically back when he was the Tasmaniac, he and Sabu kind of started teaming up, and eventually they had a falling out, and there was a match where I believe Tazz broke Sabu's neck. Hold on. Actually, let's put this on pause real quick. I want to make sure.
Sabu's neck.
Huh? Oh, yeah. See, I want to make sure I get the events.
Tazz got his neck broken by Dean Malenko and somebody else.
Okay. Let's come back to it. Basically, what happens is that while he's the Tasmaniac and they're tagging, Tazz gets his neck broken. So he's out, and when he comes back, he's not the Tasmaniac anymore. He's Tazz. He's mixed martial arts Tazz, the most dangerous man in the world. And he and Sabu are no longer friends. Later on, and as over time, Tazz starts getting put up against everybody, and he's tapping them all out. He is killing Jericho.
I love this run.
Oh my God. He's tapping out. They bring in like some mixed martial arts guy to job to him. He's tapping out Van Dam,
That's one of
Bam
my
Bam
favorite
Bigelow.
things too, that they're just like, oh, let's bring in somebody who's not even a wrestler and have them fight him. And like they were going to bring in Kurt Angle and have Angle fight him because he can beat anybody from any sport.
Yeah, it's this huge, huge thing. And they never get Tazz and Sabu back together again for real. They never have that match. And everybody knows that they used to be partners, and everybody knows that there's animosity there, and they're the two biggest stars in the company. I mean, Raven's a big star too, but Tazz and Sabu kind of represent like the renegade, dangerous style of ECW in totally different ways. And finally, they hype it up on WWE TV. They hype it up all over the shows for a year. This is what this show is built upon. It's not the official main event, but it is absolutely the most important thing that's going on in this show. And they build this story and they build it. And there's this fantastic segment that I'll always remember. It's one of the favorite thing that they ever did on ECW TV, where Tazz is wrestling a match and he's beating somebody's ass and the lights go out. Everybody knows what's going to happen. Lights come back on. Sabu is in the ring pointing at the ceiling, and Tazz is standing there with his arm crossed, glaring at him, not impressed. And that is basically the appeal of this match. Tazz is not afraid of Sabu. Tazz is desperate to fight Sabu. Sabu hates Tazz. Sabu wants to murder Tazz. But Sabu is not good enough to beat Tazz. And
Yeah.
that is the story of this match.
Yeah. So I do think this is kind of an awkward match just because their styles really clash. You know, Sabu is a garbage wrestler, and Tazz is doing a lot of MMA stuff at this point. So it's like Tazz is the ground and pound guy. Sabu throws chairs at people, and those two styles I don't think mix together very well.
Yeah, it's definitely a really sloppy. I do like the beginning of the match. Like Tazz makes a super impressive entrance, but Sabu just leaps into the ring because he's ready to fucking go. And then like the first couple of things that they do, they look good because Tazz is just basically throwing him around. And the story of the match is if Tazz can lock in the Tazz mission, it's over. So Sabu's only chance is not to let him. And nobody has ever avoided the Tazz mission ever before. So they kind of keep going back to that. Like Tazz is going to suplex you until you lose focus, and then he's going to Tazz mission you and you're done. Sabu keeps avoiding, keeps going for flips, keeps going for jumps, keeps going for all this crazy shit. Tazz has no idea how to wrestle somebody like that. Those aren't the matches that he does. It's a good idea, but Sabu does not wrestle clean matches.
He didn't botch as much stuff here as I've seen him do, but there's still a lot of things that get screwed up. At one point, they go for a tornado DDT through a table, and maybe you could charitably say that Tazz blocks it and slams Sabu through it, but really, like, they just kind of lose each other and Sabu falls through the table.
Yeah, and I mean, there's kind of a lot of stuff like that, but they do manage to convey the idea that Sabu is actually hurting Tazz like nobody has before. And like they get a pretty interesting match out of it. It's not something that could have lived up to the hype. And that's probably why they didn't put it on last, because they knew it wasn't going to be the kind of match for the build that they gave it.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing here was when Tazz, at the beginning of the match, just started riding Sabu and cross-faced him until he smashed his nose open.
Yep. I mean, Tazz in this period, like, it's so funny. If you only know him as the announcer, you would never imagine. This guy came across as, like, basically, there are some people who believe that Goldberg is a ripoff of Tazz, and I kind of believe them. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, this kind of credible ass kicker, can't be phased, can't be beaten.
I think they're both basically attempts to make Mike Tyson as a professional wrestler.
Exactly.
But a lot of Goldberg's like stuff in the ring is very Taz like, the takedowns and the submission holds and some of that other stuff he would do. And I don't know whether that was actually inspired by Taz or if it's just the case that like Goldberg was, not very skilled as a pro wrestler at that point and he had some martial arts training, so that was just stuff he could do.
It's entirely possible. The getting led to the ring by security and the entourage is kind of a thing that Taz did too. It's one of those things where like you never know, but you can definitely see the influence here. Taz during this period is one of the coolest characters in wrestling history to me. Like he's just a frigging badass, and it's to the point where they wind up not being able to do much with him because he can't credibly lose because the fans don't believe anyone can beat him. So there's like nowhere to go.
I love when Bam Bam Bigelow beat him. Bam Bam Bigelow to beat him had to slam him through the ring to escape the Taz mission and then drags him out from the hole in the ring and is able to pin him.
And that's Bam Bam Bigelow, who was twice his size,
Yeah.
doing that, and fans still chanted bullshit because they didn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the example of they would take whatever, ECW fans, they'd buy into whatever they were shown. So even though Taz is like 5'7", people still bought that he was the baddest man on the planet.
And I do want to give Taz props too, because throughout the course of the show, they're doing these like promos where everybody who's in the main event is going to sit down and cut like a big long promo about like what it means to them to be in the main event, et cetera, et cetera. All of these promos are pretty bad because they give them all like 10 minutes and they just drone on and on and on and on. And Taz cuts it like a 5-minute promo where the first 2.5 minutes are one of the best promos I've seen in a very long time. And then he just kind of keeps going and keeps getting closer to the camera so that by the end, all you can see is like his lips flapping at the camera.
Yeah.
But it's still a great promo.
Oh, he's just like, I'm going to fuck Sabu up.
Yeah. And like, what was this finishing line? It was super good. It was just like, if I was you, I wouldn't be. It's like, that doesn't make sense, but it's cool.
I'm still by it because he said it.
Yeah.
So after the match, Taz wins with the Taz mission. Kind of foregone conclusion, I guess. But Taz gets on the mic. He actually puts Sabu over, says, that was the fight of my life. Says, you can have a rematch anytime you want. Shake hands. Sabu raises Taz's arm. And then Rob Van Dam shows up and beats up Taz. RVD and Sabu put the boots to Taz, Arabian Face Buster, and then Taz's manager, Bill Alfonso, rips off his Team Taz t-shirt to reveal that he's got a Sabu t-shirt on underneath. And I feel like Fonzie managed Van Dam until ECW closed.
Yeah, Fonzie was around for a long time. I think it's funny, too, because there was a moment when he was a referee where he was going to get fired, and then he saved his career in a match with Buell McGillicuddy, which is one of those weird quirks of history. And then, he goes on to do that. The weird thing is, if you would watch this show and no other ECW from the time period, you would think that Rob Van Dam and Sabu had, never met. That, Rob Van Dam shows up and that he and Sabu were like, hey, you want to team up? And then they do. Because there's a moment where it looks like Sabu is going to hit Van Dam and save Taz, and then he just double crosses him. But they were already a team, so that wasn't anything. Anybody in ECW wouldn't have been shocked by that. Yeah,
I mean,
but I guess if they were expecting a new audience,
booking that every match has a swerve.
Yeah, and this one really bothered me with that. When you do it like this, you're basically crapping on the whole segment before it because no one's going to remember that now. No one's going to remember the match. No one's going to remember that Taz raised Sabu's arm. Now it's just an angle at the end and nothing else.
Yeah. All right, so not really main event time because there's another match after it, but we're getting to the end of the show here. Our next match, we've got the Elimination Three-Way Dance, Terry Funk versus the Sandman versus Stevie Richards. Winner gets a shot at Raven's ECW World Heavyweight Championship immediately after. So first thing that happens is Tommy Dreamer joins Joey Styles on commentary. The storyline is that Dreamer gave up his spot in the main event to Funk to give Funk, one more chance to win a world title. Um, Dreamer's commentary here is absolutely abysmal.
It's really bad. It would be better to say that he doesn't do commentary. He just is there.
No, you can almost see Joey Styles like poking him every 5 minutes, being like, "Hey, come on, say something, man."
Yeah, and they're just like, I'm watching the match. I'm focusing. It's like, all right, Tommy, come on.
Glad you're here, Tommy. I mean, I guess they just felt like they had to get him on the show, although there's no reason he couldn't just interfere in the main event like he ends up doing. But
now let me ask you a question too, because all these years later, it still seems very weird that Stevie is in this match. Now, it made sense storyline-wise at the time. Like, he wants a shot at Raven. He wants to kind of make a name for himself. But did you buy him in this role?
Doesn't seem credible. I mean, it's, again, I feel like the ECW audience just kind of buys whatever Heyman feeds them because it's a cult. But, yeah, I mean, Stevie Richards is essentially a jobber that they're putting in the main event, which, how could that ever happen? It's not like WWE would ever do something like that.
I mean, yeah, that's a pretty good point.
Yeah. Obviously referencing Jinder Mahal being the number one contender for the WWE Championship.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a story for another podcast.
Ooh. But yeah, I don't really know why Stevie's here, other than I guess they wanted a third guy. I guess they wanted to tease that he was going to get to fight Raven. But yeah, I mean, he's a joke character. He's the leader of the Blue World Order.
I wonder, I guess the idea is that all three of these guys have beef with Raven. Or at least that was the idea when Tommy Dreamer was the guy who was in it. Like, let's make a triple threat of everyone who wants Raven dead. And then one of them will get to face him in the main event for the title. And then they swap Funk in, who doesn't really have any heat with Raven. They kind of try to build a program where Raven just like, you old washed up drunk or whatever. But it's basically just a everybody wants to kill Raven kind of situation. But as much as that makes sense storyline-wise, like, this is your first pay-per-view. This is the thing that you're selling yourself to all these new viewers, and there were a ton of them. It's weird to highlight this.
Well, the hook is the legendary Funk, the Cowboy's last ride. 20 years after he lost the NWA World Heavyweight title, he's got one last chance to become a world champion. I mean, do you think that... I mean, Terry Funk is obviously a huge legend. I don't know. By 1997, I don't know how much credibility there was, how much juice there was left. I mean, at that point, I guess he had had a run in WCW in like 93, but it still feels like he's kind of been out of sight for a while at this point.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And yeah, I'm just making, because he doesn't come back to WWF as Cactus Charlie in
98.
Yeah, until later on. So yeah, it is very weird. He is one of those legends that everybody had a lot of respect for, but he's not one that's on the tip of everybody's tongue. You know what I mean? I guess he's one of those guys that like hardcore fans would obviously immediately know. And it's not like they had a ton of huge stars at their disposal to kind of swap him out with. As I said, there weren't a lot of great finished product former main eventers just floating around the independent scene at the time. You know what I mean? Especially not ones who wanted to wrestle in ECW doing matches like this. So it was kind of right up Terry Funk's alley to do it. I'm not sure why they didn't just have him face Raven straight up, because everybody knows that that's where this is going. And like, it's a good story. It's a match I want to see.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have just been that they wanted to do the three-way dance because it was something different. It was, a match type that had only rarely been seen at this point.
It winds up working pretty well. I mean, I wouldn't say that what is basically two matches in one is great, but it works.
Yeah. So it's got the Sandman in it, so of course it's going to be kind of a garbage match.
Yeah.
A ladder gets involved. There's a ladder helicopter spot. Funk goes for a moonsault off the ladder, and I think he was supposed to hit, but he completely misses Richards.
Yeah, he sure does. He didn't know where the hell he was going with that thing.
um, yeah, there's a lot of three-way spots here that I think look very contrived, but it's still the three-way is such a novelty at this point that I still think it's just kind of cool to see in this era.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And obviously, Terry Funk is somebody who means a lot to ECW. I mean, I think he means a lot to like Paul Heyman himself for whatever reason. And you can kind of see why too, because this is maybe the last time where Terry Funk was really good. Like he's doing all the Terry stuff here. It all looks like garbage, but like the fans are so into Terry. They're so into the story. Like they love him. It's a meaningful thing, even
Yeah,
while it's actively a poop match. Like it's a great story.
it's a Rocky story that a guy's going to win the world title at 53 years old.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, like he wins it with a roll up, right? It's not like he it's the moonsault.
But yeah, so it's an elimination match. Stevie gets eliminated after a double power bomb. Sandman brings in barbed wire, but he ends up getting whipped with it. Sandman wraps his body in barbed wire, which is, come on, guys. Like, why would you do that? And he hits some body avalanches on Funk, and then a top rope leg drop. Funk puts a trash can on Sandman's head. Richards comes back, hits the Stevie kick, and Funk follows up with the moonsault, and he gets the win.
Yeah,
Um,
Sandman really got screwed over here.
yeah, I mean, I thought this was fun. It's a ridiculous match, but that it's ECW.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of love the idea that like Sandman's so drunk, who cares? He doesn't feel pain. Just wraps himself, just turns himself into a barbed wire baseball bat.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
I mean, it's a match between two people who just no concept of pain. Whatever, let's just do it.
It's also that part of the deal they made to get this pay-per-view aired was like, we'll keep it under control. No, there won't be any excessive blood. And here in the main event, I mean, Funk doesn't bleed too much, but like you've still got a guy wrapping himself in barbed wire and like could easily get cut in the wrong spot and just bleed everywhere.
Oh yeah, and I mean, Punk's bleeding well enough that as the show's going off the air, like he hugs Dreamer, and Dreamer comes off of him, and he is all red on one side. Like he is just red from head to toe.
Yeah, they were probably pushing the limits of the goodwill from the pay-per-view company, but I think when the buy rate came in, that was probably water under the bridge.
Yeah, because boy was it impressive. But yeah,
So now we've got our main event. Raven comes out. Funk is pretty good bloody mess here. I do think Dreamer's commentary improves a little bit as he like starts to really sound anguished at how badly Funk is getting beaten up. Um, Funk pretty much just gets the shit kicked out of him now for the next couple minutes.
which is
Um,
really the right way to do it. They make Raven look strong. It's not like when Funk inevitably beats him. It's not like Raven looks like an asshole who got jobbed out by a 53-year-old man. Like he beats Funk up.
Yeah. There's some Ravens flock interference. A woman named Reggie Bennett beats up Funk. Didn't really know what the deal with this was.
Me either, man.
Yeah. Again, it's just ECW, and everything had to have a swerve and interference and 10 levels of chaos. Raven gets on the mic. He says he's going to put Funk through 3 tables, just like what happened to Dreamer a couple months ago. Dreamer gets up from the announce table to go help Funk, but Big Dick Dudley shows up and beats him up. Um, we're back in the ring. Raven hits the even flow. He hits the referee with the even flow DDT. Don't know what his motivation for that was. Raven, Dreamer, and Dudley are fighting, and the announce table is up on a high platform above the arena. So the idea is that Dudley's going to choke slam Dreamer through 3 tables, which is something that had happened a couple months before this. But Tommy blocks it, and he choke slams Big Dick Dudley through the tables. This is a like 10-foot drop with concrete at the bottom. This is an absolutely insane bump, and I bet Big Dick got like $250 for this.
Yeah. And like that's the other thing about ECW is somehow they convince people to take bumps like that just for the sake of taking bumps like that, because why the hell would you ever agree to this?
Yeah, like I don't think I can put a dollar figure on how much you'd have to pay me to take that bump.
And yet, like I know people in my everyday life who are just like, shit, I'd do it for free. No cameras on. Let's do it.
Yeah. I yeah, this what are they thinking? Like a drop that far, you start thinking about all the things that could happen, but these guys were just so bought in that we're going to do it. He's going to take this big drop anyway. And I mean, Big Dick Dudley, as far as I remember, never really got a push, but this certainly showed up in a lot of ECW video packages over the years.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of what it was. Is like so many other people had done spots like this by this point. Like, how can you him and haw and be like, I really don't want to take that spot when like the segment before New Jack jumps out of the balcony.
Yeah. So Dreamer gets into the ring. He hits the DDT on Raven. Funk covers. 1, 2. Raven kicks out, but the bell rings anyway. Don't know whether that was a tease or just a legit screw up. And then Funk cradles Raven and pins him.
And this is kind of a tenuous moment because, like, Paul Heyman revealed later, ECW was on a major time crunch. Like, they had a hard limit where their show was going to go off the air no matter what. So at that moment, if chaos takes place and Funk doesn't, like, get the situation sorted out quickly, you don't have a finish to your first pay-per-view. And literally,
that
like,
would have been quite a disaster.
I guess, like, the Transformers blew and the power went out, like, 30 seconds after they went off the air, too. Like, this could have ended, like, so badly.
Yeah. I mean, the production mostly held up for this. The only thing that really went wrong is the house mic was terrible. Whenever anybody was talking on the house mic, you could barely hear them. But other than that, like, they pulled off the production. The lighting was good enough. They didn't have the commentary never went out that I can remember. Everything, held up that I can think of. So
Yeah.
just barely got through the night. But yeah, huge celebration. Funk jumps into the crowd and we play out. Great finish to the show. As far as the show on the whole, I would say, looking back on it, I don't think most of the show holds up, and a lot of these matches were just kind of, very garbage wrestling matches. But at the time, I can pretty much guarantee you that nobody who bought that show was disappointed in it.
There's a mythology to this show, right? Like, this is one of the most anticipated shows. I don't know if I want to say like in wrestling history or whatever, but like at least for smart
fan.
Yeah, I think this was the first truly gigantic show for like the new Smark audience, right? Yeah. So the anticipation was enormous. They did everything they could to get the word out, get their friends involved. Everybody, basically their entire potential audience watched this show. It was that big of a deal. Like, the number they put out was frankly impossible. Like, they got everyone who could conceivably have watched this match to watch the show.
I think it did like 75,000 buys, which is insane. They weren't even on national TNA TV. Ever did.
Yeah,
like more than TNA ever did.
Like, that's madness.
TNA was on national TV for 10 years.
Yeah, towards the end, literally the last year they were in business, WCW was doing lower pay-per-view numbers than this.
Yeah, I think the last WCW pay-per-view only did like 50,000 buys.
Which is incredible. Like, this is a landmark moment in the history of independent wrestling. It's a landmark moment in the history of wrestling in general. Like, it's that kind of a show. What takes place on the show isn't amazing, but there are a lot of moments that were remembered for a very, very long time. Van Dam and Funk winning and all of this stuff. Like, it all just kind of collates into an unmistakably great package. This is also the only ECW show I like.
I'm trying to think. Heatwave 98 is pretty good, and I think maybe Anarchy Rules 99, but this is the good stuff was before this. Like the good stuff was what got them on pay-per-view, and as they got each like larger level of exposure, they lost more and more of their talent. Like right after this, Raven leaves for WCW. And then when they finally get on national TV, when they get the deal with TNN, Tazz and Dudley's leave immediately. So just the attrition killed them.
Yep. And it's just one of those things. Like there was no way for it to sustain itself, no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what anybody inside the company says that they think could have happened or whatever. It was never built to sustain itself. You get too big in order to keep your place, and then you're too small to actually compete. And it's one of those weird in-between areas. Like Ring of Honor got there, and they're still there. They've never escaped it. TNA started there and never escaped it. Like basically every company but WWE is going to be stuck in this limbo until somebody figures out how to get higher.
Well, they'd never be able to outbid WWF or WCW, so they're going to lose anybody who is worth being taken by a bigger company. And also, when your brand is just that you push the envelope, there's two things that happen. One is you're going to push it too far, like they did with mass transit. And the other thing is you just can't top yourself eventually. Like, how many times can you shock people? What do you do eventually? How many flaming tables can you put people through?
And I mean, WWE found that after the Attitude Era, where they basically had to like re-educate fans as to what wrestling matches were. And that's a process that took like 5 years. ECW was way further down the path than that. They never would have been able to walk it back. I think you mentioned that Paul Heyman even said that like Ring of Honor is what his company would have had to become. But I don't know how the hell it gets there from where it was at the end.
No, I mean, this is, these fans have been trained that like their every whim is going to be indulged, that the women are going to get naked for them, and the guys are going to bleed for them in every match, and guys are going to get thrown off balconies, and every insane thing that could possibly happen is going to happen. So I don't know how you were going to entertain them with a bunch of like really fast-paced wrestling matches.
Yeah, and I know that like the number one thing everybody says is like, no, it wasn't always like that. They had Eddie and Dean and Benoit and Mysterio. They had all those guys for a little while. That is a blip in the history of this promotion. It went on for way more years than that, where there were a number of years where like Just Incredible was like one of their top in-ring performers. That's the legacy of ECW. They made it work with guys like that, but don't sit there and pretend like that's how it was going to work forever.
Well, the guys got exposure on ECW TV, and it allowed them to get signed by the big companies. I mean, this is where Benoit and Jericho and Malenko and Guerrero and Al Snow and a bunch of other guys kind of first got their exposure on American TV.
Yeah, it sort of became a place where like guys would come in, get their exposure, have a good time, leave and go to the big time. And then they'd be like, man, I sure did love it when I was in ECW, but obviously not enough to, stay in ECW.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't miss the tiny paychecks.
Exactly.
If the checks even cleared.
Which they very rarely did.
No. Yeah, so, anything else to say to kind of wrap this one up?
No, I will say if you go back and watch these shows on WWE Network now, there is one problem. The music.
Oh, it's so butchered. It's hard to watch.
ECW was all about the music. It was very meticulously chosen. It was like very cool for the day. It was important that it was good.
Yeah.
Like there's a super intense promo that Stevie Richards is cutting here, and undercutting it is what's basically like DVD menu music. Like burr, 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 while Stevie Richards is trying to cut like the promo of his life, and it never stops, and it completely ruins it.
Any idea what the real song was?
I have no idea. I would love to go back and find out what it was, but yeah, like everybody's theme song here was the same, which was super confusing to me, except Tazz, who had his actual Kiss song entrance music.
Oh, did he? I thought I could barely hear it, but I thought he had his WWF theme.
No, he had War Machine by Kiss. I don't know if it was like an altered version that they had the rights to use or whatever.
They did like a instrumental version that was just him talking over it, so that may have been it. But even that's kind of sketchy. Like,
that's literally
they don't use the Enter Sandman Motorhead version, even though they probably could because of their relationship with Motorhead, but they don't even want to pay the royalties for that. So Sandman just has like a generic guitar riff.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what the hell exactly got Tazz the right to use that, but all the other music sucks. And it's important that you realize that that's not how it was originally. If you can find the original DVDs that will have the actual proper music on them, or it might not even be on
How
DVD.
did they get away with that?
I don't think they were distributed widely. I think it was
Yeah.
like out of people's trunks and crap.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing that like as they got big, I mean they adapted because as they would once they got on like national TV, they had to stop like ripping off the theme music, but they just like got other other cool new modern bands to do the theme music for their guys. But yeah, that was a huge part of the company that just doesn't translate because they have hacked the shows to death on DVD to avoid paying the royalties.
So that is pretty rough, and it does detract from what was a very important part of the process. Just kind of keep that in mind when you notice how shitty it is.
Yeah. All right. So I think that does it for ECW Barely Legal. Fun show to look back on. Enjoyed it even if I think a lot of it didn't really hold up, but it's an interesting, snapshot of what was cool in wrestling and in kind of pop culture in general at that point in time. So what are we looking at next time?
Oh, next time. This is the first one that I've actively requested that we do because we're going to do some TNA next time, guys. It's going to be awesome. We're going to go to – we were talking actually – this all came about because we were talking about the buy rates and how TNA's never had a show do more buys than this. Well, the closest they ever got was a little show called TNA Lockdown 2008. Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle in a worked shoot MMA match inside of a cage. And it's in Boston. And there's all this weirdness. And it's right in the middle of like the craziest and best era of TNA. And it's all downhill after this. But there's so much craziness to talk about.
Yeah. I love that match and I hate it at the same time, but we'll talk about all that next week.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Cewsh, you got anything to plug?
Nope. We are still continuing the Cewsh Scouts NXT report. We're probably going to be, even though this isn't going out for a couple of days after we recorded it, I'm probably still going to be releasing parts to that thing.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying those. I hope everybody's checking them out. I'm a big fan of Cewsh Scouts, and I think everybody else is too. You can find that all on the blog at CewshReviews.com. Follow Cewsh on Twitter at CewshReviews, and I'm on Twitter at the Lawcast. Thanks for listening to everybody. Hope we see you again next time.